This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Do you play FanDuel and feel like you aren't creating consistent money-making lineups? Go over to the DFS Doctors on Twitter at the DFS Doctors and DM them with promo code Detroit Sports to get a free trial for their analytically formulated 70% lifetime profit rate NFL and NBA lineups. The whole purpose of playing daily fantasy sports is to get out there and compete and give yourself a chance to win. So go over to the DFS Doctors. Let them help you. They have analysts on staff that look at the best optimal lineup that you can put out there to win money. So why not take advantage? At the DFS Doctors, promo code Detroit Sports.
CBD is a game changer sweeping the nation. This hemp extract is the natural way to elevate your mood, eliminate aches and pains, reduce anxiety, and keep you sleeping all night long. It can even cut your workout recovery time in half. Get in the game today with 20% off all orders of CBD and lavender products from Lavender Lane, a lavender farm located right here in Milan, Michigan. Just go to lavenderlanemi.com today and enter coupon code Detroit for 20% off your entire order. Guys, look, these amazing products are infused with calming lavender to maximize their effectiveness, meaning your CBD items only take minutes to take effect, which is way quicker than those pills you were about to swallow. On top of it, they are perfect for men and women. Lavender Lane has lab-tested CBD creams, tinctures, and roll-ons that are perfect for any situation, even if you're on the go. Put your health back in your hands by heading over to lavenderlanemi.com and entering coupon code Detroit for 20% off your entire order of CBD and lavender products. What do you have to lose? Your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back. So if you need lavender gifts for your loved ones or just looking for the natural way to ease your discomfort with CBD, go to lavenderlanemi.com and use coupon code Detroit to unlock these miraculous benefits of CBD and lavender. That's lavenderlanemi.com. And remember, use coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your CBD and lavender products from Michigan's own Lavender Lane.
Enough with the maize and blue victimology, please. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Arbor back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wall of him, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace. My fellow Michigan fans, I love you, but some of you are killing me, Smalls. The whining, the kvetching, it's gone from leaders and best to pathetic and lame. And I'm talking, of course, about what has become a stupid fan trope. That everybody better at football than Michigan is only better because they're cheating. And that the reason we haven't fulfilled our hope and potential we thought we had when Jim Harbaugh got hired 5 years ago is because everybody else is cheating. That's not true. But even if it was, let's look at some specific examples. Let's look at some facts, shall we? You know, the complaint that Ohio State is cheating, and that's why the Buckeyes have beaten us like a rented mule the past 2 years. Well, if Ohio State is cheating, it's to essentially have the same talent gap it's always had. On a future episode, I'm going to prove to you that there was a talent gap when Bo coached against Woody. There was a talent gap when we went 10-2-1 against John Cooper. It's not really that much different now than it was in those eras when we were far more competitive in the series. So toss that excuse out. Or how about, well, you know, LSU doesn't care about academics and Joe Burrow gets to take online courses and that's why he's great and LSU's great and we're not. First of all, did you know that the last 7 seasons in a row, LSU has lost 3 or more games? Did you know that? Did you know that over the last 50 years, only 10 times has LSU not lost 3 or more games in a season? Only 10 times in the last 50 years. So if they've been cheating their arses off all this time with all that in-state talent, apparently they just learned this year how to cheat a lot better because they weren't really good at it the last 7 in a row. And oh, by the way, Joe Burrow was taking master's classes online, which, by the way, Michigan offers to the general public as well. So why the snobbery? And I understand you can cheat online classes. You can cheat in classroom classes, North Carolina too, if you want. We've seen plenty of evidence that if you don't care about your school's academic integrity and want to cheat for athletes, you will, whether it's online or with a tutor or in the classroom itself. Then there's Clemson. It's a renegade program. You know, Clemson came into this season with exactly 1 more elite prospect on its roster than Michigan. If you added up the total 4- and 5-star prospects on Michigan Clemson, Clemson has 1 more of those than Michigan had going into the season. This idea that somehow we're doing it right and everyone else is doing it wrong. Hey, do you remember when Jim Harbaugh said, when he was coaching at Stanford, hey, I wanted to major in history at Michigan, but they told me I needed to major in football instead. Too much reading, too much homework. Remember that? I understand Michigan is the #1 rated public university in the world. And I understand, by and large, up north here, we do put more of a premium on the term student athlete than they do down south. You know what, though? That's pretty much always been the case. And from 1980 to 1992, you know how many national championships the SEC won? 0. They won 0. And if you think the reason Joe Burrow went from pretty good to having the greatest single season any college quarterback has ever had is because he took online master's courses, then I can't help you're dumb. You couldn't qualify for online master's courses if that's what you think. I highly doubt the Michigan coaching staff is out there recruiting and saying, you know, come to Michigan, but we're probably not going to win anything meaningful because, you know, you can go somewhere else and everybody else would pay you. Of course they're not recruiting on that pitch. Name me how many schools bring to the table the alumni base, the national brand identity, the season ticket and fan base and tradition that Michigan has. It is a very, very short list. And if you look at the list of a lot of schools that cheat, you know why they do so? Because they don't have the privilege and organic advantages that Michigan has. That's why. And so they need to cheat to make up the difference. For example, several years ago, if Laquan Treadwell was going to choose Michigan and Mississippi straight up, he's going to choose Michigan. But Ole Miss made sure it wasn't a straight up choice. We know there are renegade programs. Ole Miss would be one of them. But you know what? That's the same Ole Miss that Chris Partridge, until a few days ago, was at Michigan selling the 40-year plan to recruits. And then he left Michigan to go where? That renegade program, Ole Miss. Cheating goes on. There's no doubt about that. You want to know where cheating really goes on? In college basketball, which is probably the most corrupt sport in America not run by Don King. And yet John Beilein annually voted the cleanest coach in the country by his peers. Not once, but twice got Michigan all the way to the summit during his time here in a sport where renegade is the Facebook setting, okay? And he put a slew of guys in the NBA as well. No. These are not reasons Michigan is in perpetual not good enough limbo now. They're all excuses. They're lame. They're pathetic. And frankly, this fan base ought to be above this. If you're upset, you need to know this. If you are offended at what I just said, I'm talking about you. If you have to ask, it's about you. And when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one you hit. Stop it. So now that I got that off my chest, let's get to some actual news, shall we? Joining us now, our good friend Michael Spath from Wolverine Digest and WTKA in Ann Arbor. Brandon Brown has one more week off because apparently he thinks he's got to be a dad or something. And Michael, you're a new dad, but you're here, so we appreciate your dedication, brother. How are you?
Well, some of us just work harder than others, so you know, we're going to give Brandon a lot of grief. But you know what? He's as you've said to us before, because you've got 3 kids. There's no greater responsibility, and there's no greater job in your life than being a parent. So he's doing a good job with it, and I'm doing the best that I can. Every day, too.
And I'm at the stage where I'm just holding on for dear life. But enough about my problems, brother. Let's get to what's going on with Michigan football. We are just a few days away from the deadline to declare for the NFL draft. But from a Michigan perspective, we think pretty much everything is known now. So let's show the audience here, comings and goings, who's leaving for the NFL draft and who's going to stay. When you look at who is gone, you know Josh Uche is gone. Cesar Ruiz is gone. Donovan Peoples-Jones is gone. So Michigan's going to lose those 3 guys early with eligibility to the NFL draft. And now here are the players that have decided to come back for one more year at the University of Michigan. Nico Collins, Ambry Thomas, Carlo Kemp, Nick Eubanks, and Michael Dwumfor. So those are the 5 that are staying. Michigan's losing 3. Is this a net positive for the 2020 football team, Michael Spath? What do you think?
I think it is. I mean, I think the guys that are coming back, Ambry Thomas especially, and Nico Collins, Kwity Paye gets thrown in the mix too, are all going to be impact players for Michigan's at very important positions. Defensive end, I mean, you've got to be able to rush the passer in today's college football. We saw that yesterday in the national championship game. Trevor Lawrence looked mortal, I would say, because he was under a lot of duress. And so to have, you know, a top flight to defensive end, and I think Kwity Paye, you know, had a very good season as a junior. I think he can take that next step. Nico Collins, if utilized properly, really can be a true number 1 wide receiver at Michigan. Someone compared him the other day. I thought it was a good comparison to Marquise Walker. Maybe not the fastest guy, but someone who put up, you know, 85 catches in a season and 1,000 yards and about 12 touchdowns back in, 2001. I like that comparison. I think it could really work. And then the other one, Ambry Thomas, you know, had all the makings of being a number 1 cornerback this year. In fact, we watched, I would say, the last 4 or 5 games of the year, he was a better, more consistent cover man than Lavert Hill. So I think getting those 3 guys back really help you at 3 key positions. You know, losing Donovan Peoples-Jones, uber talented, but we kept on waiting, kept on talking about, like, oh, if he could only do this, if he could only do that, and he never really did that. And as my colleague Zach Shaw at Inside the Huddle on WTKA pointed out, you know, he was going to come back and probably be the number 3 wide receiver, maybe the number 4 wide receiver. So if you're losing, if all you're losing is your number 3 and number 4, you're not really losing much. The big impact is obviously Cesar Ruiz at the center spot. And even if Ed Warner and this coaching staff is high on redshirt freshman Zach Carpenter, you're opening up your season on the road at Washington. Week 4, you have Wisconsin. Week 5, you have Penn State. So 3 out of your first 5 games are going to be pretty challenging. And to have a returning center, especially one who is, you know, capable of being an All-American, capable of competing for the Remington Award as a top center in college football, I think that really hurts. But I think to answer your question, the net positive is certainly in Michigan's favor because of the impact players they have coming back overall.
When you look at some of the other off the field news involving Chris Partridge, Anthony Campanile, It looks like Campanile is going to stay. Rutgers announced today that it's hiring someone else as its defensive coordinator. So there's no official word at the time that we are recording this from the University of Michigan about Campanile's his status with the university. But if you do the math there, it appears that he's going to stay, which means now they just have to replace one coach, which if you look at Michigan off seasons is actually, and frankly, most major universities, that's not that much coaching turnover. So this is going to be, from a consistency standpoint, about as much coaching consistency as we've seen here since Harbaugh took over, and really about as much as you can ask for in today's college football. So you got to replace Chris Partridge on one of those spots. I would guess you'd look for an ace recruiter. So that one spot notwithstanding, your thoughts on how this coaching staff looks now heading into 2020?
Well, I still really like Josh Gaddis at offensive coordinator. I mean, he really came on towards the second half of the season. Ed Warner remains, I think, one of the best coaching hires that Jim Harbaugh's had in his 5 seasons as the offensive line coach. At quarterbacks coach, I still don't know if they have the perfect guy to mentor these quarterbacks. Certainly Shea Patterson didn't really show massive improvement from one year to the next. Running backs coach Jay Harbaugh, I know there's a lot of people that think that's like nepotism with his dad and that he can do better. But he's a good recruiter and he connects with young players. And certainly, you've got to have that at a couple different positions. Sharon Moore is a good recruiter at the tight end spot, and the tight ends had a good season. I still really like Mike Zordich as the defensive backs coach, especially the cornerbacks. I mean, I think this is a unit that reloads every single season, and it's almost like each year the cornerback play even gets slightly better than it was the year before. Don Brown is Don Brown. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that is giving him the benefit of the doubt anymore. I think people are kind of resigned that Michigan is, I don't want to say stuck with him, but I think people are resigned to the fact that, look, he's going to have, more good games than bad. It's just that the bad games are really bad, and he doesn't quite seem to have the answers for 2 or 3 opponents per year. But overall, it's a really good staff. If they can get as you said, a dynamic recruiter to fill the Chris Partridge position, that's going to be really key. And I want to know where that guy has connections to, because Chris Partridge had the New Jersey pipeline. He also was very successful in pulling guys out of the state of Georgia. Where is the next guy connected to? Is he connected to Florida? Is there still an opportunity to go down there with Miami being down and Florida State still being down? Does he have some opportunity in Texas to go down there? I mean, I wouldn't go get a guy who's connected to Louisiana, because I don't think Louisiana in the deep South is going to be mined by anybody besides Alabama, Auburn, and LSU for the foreseeable future. But yeah, where is this guy connected to? Because there's certainly pockets that Michigan could be doing better and could be grabbing a couple of elite athletes. And so I'm just going to wait and see until Jim Harbaugh makes an announcement on who that coach is to see if it's a net positive on Chris Partridge.
You mentioned Josh Gaddis a few minutes ago. You and I were talking off the air earlier today, and you pointed out to me that he had some interesting comments last night via Twitter during the national championship game. Share those with our audience if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and I'm going to have a story on Wolverine Digest about this, but essentially Josh Gaddis just said, look, man, it doesn't matter. He congratulated Joe Brady, the passing game coordinator, who most are giving credit for the Joe Burrow's transformation.
Who used to work under Josh Gaddis at Penn State, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he said, age/experience doesn't matter. Innovate and be on the cutting edge. And I mean, he's essentially saying, like, look, there's no reason to expect or to limit a team's possibilities based off of who they don't have coming back. And to me, reading that tweet and what I'm going to write about today on Wolverine Digest is, look, Michigan's going into the 2020 season with a new quarterback. With a new quarterback and 4 new offensive line starters. They're pretty well stocked at receiver, at running back, at tight end. They've got some people that they're losing along the defense. But if he's saying age and experience don't matter, then he's saying, look, doesn't matter if you have a returning quarterback or not. It doesn't matter if you have 4 new offensive line starters. Mm-hmm. Expect, higher from us. And so that's kind of the genesis of my article. I mean, he's essentially saying no excuses for Michigan football to start the 2020 season. If they lose that game in Washington, it's not because they're not experienced. It's not because they've got a first-time starter. That's not a good enough reason anymore.
You asked a question of your audience today on WTKA and in Arbor, the big picture takeaway from the just concluded 2019 college football season. And since I'm a member of your audience, I'd like to answer it for you here in real time, if you don't mind. I think the big picture conclusion is this. If you don't have an elite quarterback, you don't have a chance. Zero, zilch, zip, nada, period. And he can't be 53rd in QBR like Shea Patterson was. He can't be 23rd in QBR like Sean Clifford was. And he had a surprisingly good season at Penn State this year. If you don't have, at the very, very least, a top 15 quarterback nationally in college football, if you don't have, at the very least, depending on how loaded your league is, the second team all-conference quarterback in your league, you're not going to achieve anything significant. That was my big takeaway. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know how many times we can beat this drum over and over again, but when you look at what Joe Burrows did this year, when you look at what Justin Fields did, when you look at Jalen Hurts, when you look at Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert at Oregon, you go down the list, and the best quarterbacks in college football, hey, look at that. They are also quarterbacking the best teams in college football. And is it the chicken and the egg? Does the team make the quarterback? Does the quarterback make the team? I think the quarterback makes the team. I know that Joe Burrow was surrounded by some great talent, especially his two wide receivers, Jefferson and Chase. But, those guys were there a year ago. And while they mature and grow going into another season, the way that he performed this year made LSU arguably one of the best single-season teams in college football history. And Michigan, I think we're being generous when we say they've had good quarterback play. They've had good quarterback play for the Jim Harbaugh era, with the exception of the 2017 season. They had some good quarterback play underneath Brady Hoke. They had, one really good year of Denard Robinson or Rich Rodriguez. They had above average, maybe a little bit better than good quarterback play with Chad Henne and John Navarre before him. But, I said this on the air on Tuesday. The last time Michigan had elite quarterback play, you have to go all the way back to the 2000 season when you had Drew Henson. And even then, you only had him for about 9 games because he missed the first few games with an injury. That's the last time. We're talking 2 decades since Michigan had one of the best passers, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And in today's game, if you don't have one of those guys, you're just not winning at the ultimate level. You're not going to beat an Ohio State who has those type of quarterbacks. You're not making the playoffs. You're not competing for a title. And everything comes down to that. And, I know it's not the easiest thing to do. You can't always hit on guys. But for a guy who's the quarterback whisperer, who prides himself on his quarterbacks, who has Andrew Luck, who resurrected the career of Alex Smith, who turned Colin Kaepernick into a Pro Bowl player for a season, in year 6, if you can't produce one of the best quarterbacks in college football, I think that's the greatest indictment of where the program is right now. And so that has to happen. And I'll put it this way. If Michigan doesn't have one of the top 10 quarterbacks in college football in 2020, then they have the exact same results as they had in 2019, 2018, and 2016.
Didn't your cohort there, Zach Shaw from 24/7 Sports, didn't he have the stat that of the top 10 teams in the final AP poll for this year, every one of those teams had a quarterback in the top 15 nationally in QBR? Wasn't that the stat he had this morning?
It was the stat that he had this morning. Now, I didn't double check it, but I usually trust Zach. He's pretty
he does his homework
with all of his stats. Yeah, he does his homework. So, yeah, that's an incredible comment. The top 10 quarterbacks, or the top 10 teams in the final AP, all their quarterbacks ranked in the top 15 in QBR. That's amazing. You have to have one of these guys. And Michigan, what was Shea Patterson this year? I think 28th or so in QBR. Maybe even a little bit lower than that. He finished right around 30th, and it's after he was 53rd going into that stretch in November where he had the 3 straight 300-yard games. All right, so that gives you an idea right there. Look how quickly he rose up the ranks with those kinds of performances. If he had done that all year long, he'd have been a top 10 quarterback in the country, and Michigan's probably not 9-4. So let me quantify. Well, go ahead. Yeah, they beat Penn State and Wisconsin. Maybe Wisconsin. Who really knows what happens in the Wisconsin game? But if you go toe to toe with them. early in the first quarter and it's 14-14 after the first quarter, it's maybe a different ball game. I certainly think everybody gives him a lot of credit for the Penn State, and he played really well in the second half, but he played really crappy in the first half.
Here's the thing. At the very least, Michael, they beat Penn State. That's at the very least. Penn State and Michigan trade places. Michigan goes to that Cotton Bowl, beats Memphis, gets to 11 wins, and finishes in the top 10, and we're having a dramatically different conversation right now. That's the margin for error we're talking about. Maybe the road Wisconsin game, we just got so physically mauled in that game. It's closer, but we can't win. I don't know. But at the very least, we beat Penn State and we switch places with them, and we're sitting at 11-2 and finishing 8th or 9th in the preseason poll and thinking to our postseason poll and thinking, hey, we got a chance, as opposed to 9-4. Let me further quantify this for the audience. If we're going to get over the hump next year, this is the price of admission question. Do we have a quarterback on the roster better than Tanner Morgan at Minnesota? Because that's the minimum. That's the cover charge to get into this bar. That's the toll to get on this road, okay? That's your second team all Big Ten quarterback this year. He threw for 3,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 picks, 66% completions, and that's missing a game. He didn't play a game against Northwestern, one of the weakest teams on the schedule this year, that he set out for a concussion. So that's playing one less game than Shea Patterson did. So that's the question. Is there a quarterback on the roster that's your second team all Big Ten quarterback? Because we know we don't have one better than the numbers Justin Fields is going to put up. That's just not happening. I think we recognize that. But do you have the second team all Big Ten quarterback on your roster right now? Is there somebody that can do what Tanner Morgan did? Because if the answer is no, go get one. And if the answer is not yes, you're probably going 9-3 next year, regardless of who comes and who goes. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. And I mean, to answer your question, we really have no idea, right? I mean, we've seen glimpses of Dylan McCaffrey and glimpses of Joe Milton, and really not very much of Joe Milton. I mean, he's never been thrust into a position where the game was on the line. I mean, Dylan McCaffrey in one, maybe two situations, certainly the Notre Dame game in 2018 when he filled in for a series for an injured Shea Patterson. And then you can maybe make the case in the Army game coming out of the halftime, he got, the first play of the second half, and then got pulled after that play because he didn't read the RPO correctly. So no, there's not been a lot of opportunities to see either one of these guys. So we really just don't know. And we were talking on our show on Tuesday about whether you go get Derek King, the grad transfer from Houston, and what Zach pointed out is he's maybe not the guaranteed starter. He's not Justin Fields. He's not a Jalen Hurts. He's maybe not even a Joe Burrow in terms of what his upside is overall. So maybe don't go get him. But I think when it comes down to it, I really hope that this coaching staff is being 100% honest with themselves about what they have in that quarterback room. And if they're convinced, and the players are convinced that Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton, one of these two guys, can be that elite level quarterback, then you stand pat over these next few weeks. If you're not convinced, then you have to go kick the tires of KJ Costello. You have to go kick the tires of some of the grad transfer quarterbacks that are going to be available, and you've got to say to them, you're going to have an opportunity to come in here and compete for the starting job. KJ Costello makes the most amount of sense. Former Stanford quarterback, had a really good 2018, was banged up and just not effective in 2019 in what was a sinking ship at Stanford this past year. And so we'll see. But I know this, if next year Michigan gets average or just good quarterback play again, I'd be disappointed as a fan that they didn't go after a grad transfer. And I just don't think there's a stigma around grad transfer quarterbacks or transfer quarterbacks like there used to be. We've talked about a lot. 3 out of the 4 playoff teams who had transfer quarterbacks starting for them. You've got to put yourself in the best position to be successful in 2020, whether that is the current guys you have or a guy sitting out there on the transfer wire.
Finally, Michael, let's switch to basketball. The Wolverines gets essentially this week off before going to Iowa Friday night. And I think they've got to do some soul searching. Well, I think Juwan Howard has to do some soul searching about the defense. Everybody's talking about, what happens to Michigan in the post, but I think it's a broader problem than that. I mean, it's this defensive philosophy from the NBA that we don't double down. And I get not doing it in the NBA, because every team's got multiple shot makers on the floor at the same time. And you risk giving a guy who's a 0.0001% talent open looks or open alleys to the basket. But this is college basketball where you are a great team if you can put 3 guys on the floor that can create their own offense. And what we saw at the end of the Michigan-Oregon game is they just let Peyton Pritchard go one-on-one over and over and over again. He scored 13 straight points. We saw this with Cassius Winston last weekend. He had a career high against us. He had 9 turnovers against Purdue on Sunday. So it's not just the post, it's this overall philosophy that we don't ever emphasize have our defense emphasize taking the best player of the other team away and just play everybody straight up. This is not the NBA. There's a limited amount of offensive options on every team, even the best ones. It's not a 48-minute game, but a 40-minute game, so already there's less possessions. It's a longer shot clock, so now possessions are more valuable. I really think Juwan has got to do some serious reassessing of his defensive philosophy before a rematch against Luka Garza, who, Michigan won that game, but they scored over 100 points. They gave up over 90 points in that game, and it was really the blueprint that we've seen other coaches emulate, which is, hey, if they're going to let our best player go off, why am I calling sets? Why am I running plays? Just get it to my best player because they're going to play him straight up. What are your thoughts?
I'm really curious to see how long this can last. I mean, we're now 5 games into the conference season, and in each of the 5, they have not doubled the big. As you said, they haven't doubled the best player. And again, I wrote this for Wolverine Digest on Sunday after the game. I mean, for this to work, you need Jon Teske to be I don't even say an elite defender. You need him to be an above-average defender. And for whatever reason, something's just not right there this season with Jon Teske, and he's not performing. He's not putting up a huge fight against Daniel Otero from Minnesota, Trevion Williams from Purdue, Kofi Coburn from Illinois. These guys have worked him. And so, I'm all for Juwan Howard instilling confidence and believing in his guys and saying, I've got your back. But at some point, it just becomes neglect as a coach if you keep on doing the same thing over and over again and you're expecting a player who is not performing to go out there and suddenly just get the job done. So this weekend against Iowa presents a perfect opportunity. Luka Garza, 44 points in their last matchup, a career high. If they don't double him again and they don't give a little bit of help defense and he goes off for another 40-point game and they lose this one on the road, I think we're gonna show up on Monday for our radio show, and I think we're gonna have to really start to question the stubbornness of Juwan Howard, or just as you said, his overarching defensive philosophy. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, as a Michigan basketball fan and as someone who was super excited, like so many Michigan basketball fans, about the way that this season started. Mm-hmm. I'm, again, hopeful that on Friday there's a little bit of a difference. He has 4 days, right? One of the things that we talked about on our show on Tuesday was there wasn't a lot of time. You played all those minutes on Thursday in the Purdue game. I mean, Xavier Simpson played, 49 out of 50 minutes. Jon Teske had close to 40 minutes. And so these guys were getting rested on Friday, and you only have Saturday for kind of like a walkthrough. You couldn't go through a full practice. Now they've had 4 days to work on this and to work on help defense. And I don't want to say I expect to see it because who really knows, but I hope to see it on Friday against Iowa, because that shows that he's taking a very hard examination, not only of his own strategy, but of the way that they're executing and of what their deficiencies are defensively, and realizing he has to do something differently.
Well said. Good to talk to you, my friend. Thanks for joining us here again this week on Michigan Podcast. We'll be listening on WTKA in Ann Arbor and reading what you have to say on Wolverine Digest as well. Take care.
Thank you so much, guys.
We'll come back, wrap things up with this week's episode next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, do you agree or disagree with Juwan Howard's refusal to double-team opponent's best player? 75% of you, or 74% of you, disagree with it. Only 26% of you agree. I would really like to know, if you're in that 26%, why? We would not, there isn't a top program in college basketball that's considered good on defense that would just let the opposing team's alpha just go off against man-to-man coverage and get any shot he's able to get on his own. It just wouldn't happen anywhere else. And I get, I don't watch a lot of NBA. Apparently I'm not alone looking at the ratings. But I get, when you're looking at that elite level, when there's so many scorers on the floor for everybody, I understand why you would play this way. okay? But in college basketball, where you're fortunate if you've got a couple of guys that can get their own shot, and the elite programs have like 3, I don't know why you would just let Daniel Oturo just go off. Wouldn't you like to see what Minnesota's 4th option can do from 3-point range, from 20 feet or 23 feet now? I would like to know. Yeah, I'd kind of like to find out. I didn't, by the way, I don't think this is an absolute. And some of you are going to say, well, hey, John Beilein didn't double team that monster in the post for Purdue, Jared Haas, a couple of years ago. Well, he was also like the 3rd scoring option on a team that had Vince Edwards and Carson Edwards, okay? So if you double team that guy, those guys were left open. That's why you didn't do it. And you said, hey, Jared Haas, you beat me on your own. When we played that way against Iowa, they had multiple shooters, Wieskamp on the floor. Bohannon was still on the floor. So I even agreed with playing that way against Iowa because those guys are effective enough 3-point shooters to bury you. But against Minnesota, they got Marcus Carr out there, and then what else? It doesn't make any sense just to let teams go to their simplest, best play and player over and over and over again to beat you. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're one of those 26% that see it differently, by all means, let me know what I'm missing, because I'm clearly missing it. That brings us to this week's question of the week from lots of people. Is there going to be a podcast version of the new Bigger 10 show? And the answer is yes. The Apple, iTunes, iOS version, if you go at Bigger 10 on Twitter, the link to subscribe is there, or just look it up online when you search for podcast on Twitter, but you'll eventually see it as well on Stitcher and Google Play as well. So yes, there will be a just podcast version of the Bigger 10 show, which we're going to be taping on Wednesday right here on this exact same channel here on YouTube. So I got a great response to that first episode. Really appreciate it. We're looking forward to episode 2 later this week. And we appreciate all of you. Please give us a like, subscribe, 5-star review, whatever the case may be here on YouTube or wherever you podcast the show from. That really helps us to find more people like you and get the word out about what we're doing here. You can also follow us on Twitter all week long at Michigan Podcast. Find us online at WolverineDigest.com to keep up with all of our takes on Michigan athletics between now and next Tuesday's episode. Until then, for all of you, go Blue.